People thought they understood the history of the American South, but they were wrong. In 1983, archivists opened sealed plantation records from the Savannah River Valley and found something that should not have existed. A hidden cabin, a forbidden woman, a truth so dangerous that 5 men died to protect it. Today we begin the story those records tried to bury. And once you hear the first part, you will understand why the Hartwell family tried to silence it forever. Part 1. The Woman in the Secret Cabin. When plantation records from the Savannah River Valley were finally unsealed in 1983, historians expected the usual list of cotton yields, slave inventories, and estate receipts. Instead, they found a contradiction that shook every belief about Antebellum Georgia. On the Hartwell estate there had been a single cabin unlike any other. A cabin built for a woman known only as the mulatto Rose. What archaeologists discovered inside that cabin in 1851 should never have existed under the terror of plantation life. Beautiful hand-carved wood moldings. A brick fireplace with decorative ironwork. Real glass windows with curtains. And a locked trunk filled with objects an enslaved woman could never legally own. Someone had given her power. Someone had protected her. And someone had died for it. But long before Rose became a mystery in the archives, she was a quiet woman who arrived under the burning sun of a Georgia summer. In 1851, the Hartwell Plantation stretched across 2,000 acres of fertile land near the Savannah River. It stood 20 miles southwest of Augusta and was known as one of the most productive estates in Burke County. Cotton fields reached almost to the riverbank. Tobacco and rice filled the lowlands. The labor of 143 enslaved people made the Hartwell family wealthy. At the top of the hill the main house stood tall and proud. A 2-story Greek Revival home with white columns that gleamed in the morning light. Magnolia trees lined the road leading to it, and each spring the scent of their flowers filled the warm air. Thomas Hartwell had inherited the plantation 8 years earlier at the age of 38. His peers called him a progressive planter. That meant he preferred quiet psychological control over the whip, though he did not hesitate to use violence when he felt it was needed. He kept detailed records. He attended church every Sunday. He served on the county agricultural board. To the outside world he was a man of order and discipline. His wife Catherine was a Charleston woman with fine manners and expensive taste. She brought wealth and powerful social ties to the marriage. They had 2 children. Richard, who was 14 and already learning how to manage the land. And Anne, who spent her days practicing French and sewing in the upstairs parlor. Behind the main house stood 2 long rows of slave cabins. Each building held 6 to 10 people. The structures were simple boxes with dirt floors and wide gaps in the wood walls that let in cold wind and rain. Fireplaces were made from mud and sticks. Families received basic rations each week and worked from sunrise to nightfall through spring planting and fall harvest. Sundays were their only hours of freedom, and even those belonged more to exhaustion than rest. But one cabin did not match the others. It sat at the end of the western row, far enough away to be noticed. To most people it looked ordinary. But those who walked closer saw differences. The wood looked newer. The roof was stronger. The door hung straight instead of sagging. Someone had cared for it. A small vegetable garden grew beside it, though no one else had one. And unlike every other cabin, it held only one person. Rose. She had arrived in the summer of 1848, purchased at an estate sale in Augusta. The ledger described her as a mulatto female about 18 years old with house training and exceptional appearance. Thomas Hartwell had paid $850 for her, nearly 3 times the usual price. His wife had not traveled with him. When Rose stepped onto the plantation, every enslaved person noticed her. She had honey-colored skin, smooth and bright in the sun. Her features were delicate. Her hair curled softly when she did not tie it back. There was a grace to her movements. Not natural but trained. She also could read something that became clear when she picked up medicine bottles in the main house and studied their labels. Her voice carried no southern accent. She spoke like someone raised around educated white families somewhere far from the fields. At first she worked inside the main house doing sewing and light cleaning. But within 2 weeks Thomas announced a change. Rose would live alone in her own cabin and perform special duties for the family. He never said what those duties were. She stopped appearing in the main house. She was not sent to the fields. She received better clothing than the other women. She received white flour and sugar and real coffee. Things the others never tasted. Whispers started quickly. Some enslaved women claimed they saw Thomas visiting Rose's cabin at night. Others said Catherine's face hardened whenever her name came up. The overseer Klaus Fischer, a German immigrant, seemed afraid to approach Rose at all. He had orders to never discipline her. When a field hand made a crude joke about Rose, Fischer whipped him and sold him to another plantation within days. The isolation would have broken many people. But Rose accepted it without complaint. She spoke only when necessary. She kept her face calm. She attended no gatherings. She formed no friendships. She refused to participate in the small acts of quiet rebellion that helped others survive. To the community she became a ghost, a beautiful silent figure who lived under the protection of the master. But the truth was far stranger. Rose was watching. She studied the movement of people. She counted hours and footsteps. She learned who held true power and who only pretended. At night she lit the small oil lamp Hartwell had given her. Under a loose floorboard she kept a journal and wrote in it carefully. Her journal was her weapon. Everything changed on the morning of April 3 in the year 1851. Catherine Hartwell did not come down for breakfast. Dinah, the house servant, went upstairs to find her. Catherine lay in bed staring at the ceiling. Breathing, but frozen, silent, unresponsive. The doctor rode from Augusta and examined her while Thomas waited outside the room. When he stepped out he claimed it was a nervous condition brought on by fear and poor diet. But the look in his eyes told another story. Something had begun, something he feared, and somewhere in her private cabin Rose closed her journal and listened to the hurried footsteps outside. She knew the moment she had been preparing for was finally here. If you want part 2 next, say, continue with part 2. Engaging hook. Catherine Hartwell was supposed to be recovering from a nervous condition, but inside her dim bedroom she whispered something far more terrifying. She claimed her husband had killed her sister. She claimed Rose had been brought to replace the dead woman. And she warned that Rose would be next. But the truly frightening part was this. Catherine was not confused. She was right. Part 2. The sister no one spoke of. Thomas Hartwell told everyone that Catherine needed delicate care. He said she required someone calm and gentle. Someone with a steady hand. He said that someone would be Rose. He stood before her in the hallway, with his polite tone and cold eyes, giving instructions that felt more like commands delivered behind a velvet curtain. You will attend to her during her recovery. You will sleep in the small room beside her bedroom. You will give her medicine. You will watch her. You will speak to no one. Rose kept her face lowered. That was the safest way to hide her thoughts. She answered softly, "Yes, sir." But she noticed the flicker in his expression. A shadow. A calculation. Something he tried to hide. Catherine has been saying things that are not rational, Thomas said. If she speaks to you of matters that sound confused, you are not to repeat them. Rose nodded. Yes, sir. But inside she felt a cold tightening. People rarely warn about madness unless they are afraid of truth. The small room Thomas had prepared was hardly more than a closet. A narrow bed, a washstand, a single window. But compared to her cabin it was comfort. And it placed her near Catherine at all hours. When Rose stepped into the main bedroom she expected a shell of a woman. Instead she found Catherine Hartwell lying still but awake. Her blonde hair spread across the pillow like pale silk. Her eyes open but unfocused. Rose spoke gently. Mrs. Hartwell, I am here to care for you. At first there was no response. Then Catherine's eyes suddenly found her face. She stared as if seeing a ghost. And then she whispered the words that made Rose's heart stop. He killed her. You look just like her. He killed my sister and now he brought you here to remind me. Rose felt every muscle tighten, but she kept her face calm. She had heard nothing about a dead sister. The enslaved community knew almost everything that happened in the big house, yet no one had mentioned such a story. You should rest, ma'am, Rose said. The doctor said you must rest. Catherine's hand shot out with surprising speed. She gripped Rose's wrist with thin but powerful fingers. Her eyes sharpened, suddenly awake and alive. You must listen to me, she whispered. You do not understand what Thomas is. He cannot stop himself. He will do the same to you. You must leave this house while you still can. Before Rose could speak, footsteps approached. Catherine released her instantly. Her expression faded back into blankness as if a mask had fallen over her face. Thomas entered the room with a glass of dark medicine. See that she drinks all of it, he said. Rose helped Catherine sit up. The smell of laudanum mixed with other herbs rose from the glass. Catherine drank obediently and soon her eyelids grew heavy. Thomas watched her slip into sleep, then gestured for Rose to follow. As I said, my wife speaks irrationally. You must ignore anything she says. Is that clear? Yes, sir. Thomas walked away. Rose returned to the adjoining room and sat awake in the dark. She did not sleep. She listened to Catherine breathe. She replayed every word in her mind. A dead sister. A warning given with desperate fear. A husband who rushed to silence her. Something terrible had happened in the Hartwell house. And Catherine believed it would happen again. The next morning Rose began searching for answers. She moved through the house as she had been trained long before her arrival in Georgia. Quiet, unnoticed, invisible to those who did not think she could see or understand. While tending to Catherine she studied everything. Downstairs the public rooms were filled with polished respectability. Imported furniture, framed paintings, a piano that young Anne played each afternoon. It was the image of a cultured Southern family. But the upstairs rooms whispered a different story. Catherine's bedroom held a locked cabinet. Through the small space between the door and frame Rose saw letters tied neatly with black ribbon. On the mantel sat a silver-framed daguerreotype placed so Catherine could see it from her bed. Rose lifted it gently. The image showed two young women in matching dresses. Their faces similar enough to be twins. One was clearly a younger Catherine with brighter eyes and a lively smile. The other woman had darker hair and a more serious expression. On the back of the photograph in faded ink were the words, Catherine and Louisa Pemberton, Charleston, 1839. Louisa. The name Catherine had whispered in terror. That afternoon Thomas left for a meeting in Augusta. Catherine slept deeply under her medicine. The house slaves were busy with chores. Rose seized the moment. She returned to the locked cabinet. She had learned to pick locks years earlier from a man in Virginia who had once been a skilled carpenter. She worked quietly. The simple lock clicked open. Inside were dozens of letters. All addressed to Catherine. All written in the same elegant hand. Rose chose one and began to read. Dearest sister, I write with news that will surely surprise you. Mr. Hartwell has asked Father for permission to call on me. You know my feelings about plantation life, but he seems a sincere gentleman. Father says it is an excellent match. I confess some excitement despite my hesitations. Please write and tell me your thoughts. Your loving sister, Louisa. Rose read another, and another. She felt a cold chill spread through her body. The letters showed a growing courtship between Louisa and Thomas. A future building in careful sentences. A life Louisa expected to live. But Louisa had never lived on the Hartwell plantation. Louisa had never been mentioned by anyone. Louisa had vanished. And Rose understood something that made her stomach twist. Catherine was not terrified of madness. She was terrified of memory. Louisa had come to this house. And Louisa had disappeared inside it. Rose placed the letters back inside the cabinet with shaking hands. The horror inside the Hartwell family was deeper than she had imagined. And she knew that Thomas Hartwell had chosen her for a reason she had not yet uncovered. A reason that might destroy her if she did not discover the truth first. If you want part 3, just say continue with part 3. Engaging hook. Some secrets do not stay buried. They wait in the dark, watching, listening, and choosing the right moment to rise again. And in the Hartwell house, the truth was beginning to breathe. Part 3. Rose stood in Thomas Hartwell's study, trying to keep her heartbeat quiet. The heavy curtains blocked the sunlight, and the room felt like a place where the truth went in but never came out. Thomas watched her the way a hunter watches an animal that has learned too much. Dr. Winthrop says Catherine talks more now, Thomas said softly. He says the medicine has opened her memory. I find that interesting. Rose did not answer. His voice was calm, but she felt danger in every word. He talked about her northern past, about the Quaker family who had taught her to read and write. He talked about how unusual it was for someone in her place to have such skills. Then he stepped close enough that Rose could smell the tobacco on his breath. Catherine's sister died in a tragic accident. That is the only truth that matters, he said. But Rose had heard too many whispers. She had read Louisa's letters. She had seen the fear in Catherine's eyes. She knew Thomas Hartwell wanted control more than he wanted truth. When Thomas dismissed her, she walked out of the study with careful steps. But inside her mind, everything was racing. She had become a threat simply because she knew too much. Upstairs, Catherine waited in her bed with the blanket pulled to her chin. She looked at Rose like someone who had lived in fear for too long. "Did he ask you about me?" Catherine whispered. Rose nodded. Catherine closed her eyes. "He knows something has changed." Rose sat beside her and spoke softly. "I will protect you if I can." Catherine opened her eyes again. Her voice shook. "You cannot protect yourself. Do you understand that? You are living the life Louisa lived. He will not let you leave. And if you become a problem, he will find a way to erase you." That night Rose could not sleep. She sat in the little room beside Catherine's bedroom and listened to every sound in the hallway. The house felt alive, almost breathing in the darkness. She pulled out her journal and added what she had learned. The letters. The diary Catherine once saw. The stare Thomas gave her when he thought she was not looking. The strange way he isolated her from the others. And the fact that another woman had lived in the same cabin before her and had simply vanished. The candle burned low as she wrote. She knew she needed proof. Something more than stories whispered in dark rooms. She needed evidence that could make even a powerful man fear exposure. The next morning, she began to look for more answers. She had learned how to move without being noticed. She knew when to walk with noise and when to slip like a shadow. She listened carefully. People spoke freely when they thought she could not hear. Dinah the cook remembered Louisa. "Pretty girl," Dinah said as she shaped dough into loaves. But she was uneasy around Master Thomas. "I saw the way she looked at the window when she thought he was not watching. Like a bird that wanted to fly." Rose asked what Dinah remembered about the day Louisa died. Dinah paused, flour covering her hands. "He came back wet and shouting for help," she said. "But his clothes, they were ripped. And Miss Louisa, when they found her, her dress looked torn too. People said the river did that. But I have washed many bodies pulled from water. That one was different." The story sent chills up Rose's spine. Later Rose spoke to Fisher, the overseer. He stood by the barn door with a hammer in his hand and a serious look on his face. "Mr. Hartwell kept another woman before you came," he told her. "She lived in your cabin. Then she was gone. Sold," he said. "But no trader carried her away. No papers were signed. She vanished." This confirmed everything Rose feared. Days passed, and Catherine slowly grew stronger. Her face lost some of the pale, haunted look. But her eyes still searched the room like someone expecting danger. When Rose brushed her hair, Catherine spoke quietly. "I thought if I was perfect he would forget Louisa. But he never did. I was never enough for him. I was safe only as long as I obeyed." Rose asked if she ever thought about running away. Catherine gave a broken laugh. "Where would I go? A woman cannot own land or money without her husband. If I ran, he would take the children and call me insane. He controls everything." Those words stayed with Rose. She realized Catherine lived in a gilded cage, while Rose lived in one made of chains. But both cages belonged to the same man. That evening someone knocked. It was Richard, Thomas's 14-year-old son. His expression was stiff, like he practiced it in the mirror. "Mother wishes to see you," he said. "Father wants you in the study." Rose felt the air tighten around her. Something was coming. She followed, but her mind worked quickly. Every word she had heard, every letter she had read, every clue she had gathered was becoming part of a larger picture. And that picture was deadly. Thomas greeted her with a calm expression. He spoke about intelligence. He spoke about loyalty. He said too much knowledge was dangerous. Then he stepped closer. "You are valuable to me, Rose. But value depends on obedience. Do you understand?" Rose bowed her head. "Yes, sir." She wanted to scream and run. But she kept her voice even. She had learned long ago that survival often depended on staying quiet at the right time. Thomas watched her for a long moment, as if he was trying to see inside her mind. Then he dismissed her. When she returned upstairs, she found Catherine awake and trembling. "He asked you about me. He asked if I told you the truth." Rose nodded. Catherine whispered, "He knows. He knows I told you. And he will not let the past rise again. Not Louisa. Not the other woman. Not anything." Rose sat in the dark that night and knew the truth. She was not looking for answers anymore. She was fighting for time. Because in the Hartwell house the dead were never truly gone. And she was next. Engaging hook. Some secrets escape the grave. Some cling to the living. And some, like the truth behind Louisa Pemberton's death, return when you least expect them. Part 4. The house felt colder the moment Rose stepped out of Thomas Hartwell's study. It was the kind of cold that did not touch the skin but slipped into the bones. She held her breath as she walked down the hallway, her heartbeat loud enough that she feared someone might hear it. Thomas had looked at her with a calm smile, yet every word he spoke carried the weight of a trap. He knew about her past. He suspected her intelligence. He suspected her conversations with Catherine. And now, Rose understood something clearly. She was no longer simply a possession. She was a threat. She reached Catherine's room and closed the door quietly behind her. Catherine sat up on the bed, pale and trembling, as if she sensed the danger drifting through the walls. "Did he call for you, Rose?" "Yes, ma'am, he knows something." Catherine's hands shook as she pulled the blanket tighter around her shoulders. "He always knows. That is his gift. He sees everything except the truth about himself." Rose sat beside her and lowered her voice. "He asked what you said during your confusion. He asked about my past. He said he paid a premium price." Catherine laughed gently, a soft broken sound. "Then it is beginning." "What is beginning?" Rose asked. "The unraveling. It happens every time. You remind him too much of my sister. You walk the halls the way she did. You look at the river the way she did. He thinks he can control it, but the guilt returns. The anger returns. And the fear returns. When that happens, someone always disappears." Rose felt a stab of dread. Another woman had vanished before her. Louisa had died under suspicious circumstances. Catherine's diary had been burned to ash. All of it painted a picture Rose could no longer deny. Thomas Hartwell was a man who made his own truth. And anyone who threatened that truth became part of the river's dark history. Catherine leaned forward and gripped Rose's hand. "You must be careful. He will not act suddenly. He will wait for the right moment. Something that looks reasonable to others. A fall, an illness, a disappearance. And no one will ask why." Rose nodded and tried to stay calm, but her thoughts raced. She needed a plan. She needed allies. And she needed to survive long enough to use the information she had gathered. Later that night, after Catherine had fallen asleep, Rose carried her small journal into the tiny room beside Catherine's. She added a description of her meeting with Thomas, recording every word he said. Her handwriting was neat and controlled even though her hands trembled. "He knows too much. He suspects too much. I must move carefully." She closed the journal and hid it beneath a loose floorboard. Then she sat in silence for a long time, listening to the wind rustling the magnolia trees outside. The moonlight streamed through the window and cast a pale glow across the room, reminding her of the nights she had spent in Philadelphia reading by candlelight. She had once believed education could protect her. But here, in Georgia, knowledge was dangerous. The next morning, Rose found herself summoned again, not by Thomas this time but by his son Richard. He stood at the bottom of the staircase, his posture stiff and too formal for a 14-year-old boy. "Mother wants you in the garden," he said. Rose followed him outside. Catherine sat beneath a large oak tree, wrapped in a shawl, breathing the fresh air. She looked healthier today, though sadness still lingered in her eyes. "Sit with me, Rose," Catherine said. Richard stepped away, pretending to study the shrubs, though he listened to every word. "I must tell you something important," Catherine whispered. "It concerns Thomas's business dealings in Augusta. He has grown anxious about money. There are debts, investments that did not succeed. He hides it well, but I know the signs. He becomes more controlling when he feels powerless." Rose understood instantly. A desperate man was a dangerous man. And Thomas was no ordinary man. Catherine took Rose's hand again. "I do not want to die here," she said. Her voice shook, yet there was a firm resolve beneath it. "If he believes I am speaking against him, he will take action. But you must not let my fear ruin your chance. You are smarter than he knows." Before Rose could answer, the garden gate opened and Dinah, the kitchen matron, walked toward them. She carried a small basket and moved with purpose. "Miss Catherine the First have a message," she said quietly. "It is about Mr. Hartwell. He left early this morning. Something about a dispute in Augusta. But the overseer says he also visited the blacksmith before leaving." Catherine's eyes widened. "That means he expects trouble. He always strengthens security when he feels something will go wrong." Dinah glanced nervously toward the house. "And he told Fisher to keep a close watch on Miss Rose." Rose felt the ground shift beneath her feet. So soon, so suddenly. Thomas was tightening his grip before she had even made a move. Catherine whispered, "The unraveling has begun." That night, as lightning flashed over the plantation, Rose stayed awake in her small room. The storm raged outside, shaking the shutters and sending wind swirling through the hallways. Every thunderclap felt like a warning. She leaned close to the floorboard and whispered to herself, "I must find the truth about the other woman. I must find what happened to the one before me. If I understand her fate, I will understand my own." The storm grew louder, rattling the windows like a fist demanding entry. Rose stared at the door of her room, half expecting it to burst open. She breathed deeply and prepared herself. Because now, survival would not be a matter of obedience. It would be a matter of uncovering secrets buried deeper than the river itself. If you want, I can continue with part 5 in the same style. Engaging hook. Sometimes the dead leave clues behind. Sometimes they whisper warnings to the living. And sometimes the truth waits in the darkest corners of a house that was never meant to keep secrets. Part 5. The storm that shook the plantation all night made the morning feel strange and heavy. The sky was gray, the air thick, and the house seemed to hold its breath. Rose woke with a start, unsure if she had slept at all. The memory of thunder still echoed in her bones. She washed her face in a small bowl of cool water, trying to calm herself. Today she needed answers. Not guesses. Not fears. Answers. Catherine was already awake when Rose stepped into her room. She sat beside the window, staring at the dripping magnolia leaves outside. She looked stronger but more alert, as if her mind had sharpened. "Overnight, did you sleep?" Rose asked. Catherine smiled faintly. "Not well. My dreams were filled with Louisa. She was running along the riverbank, calling my name. Every time I reached her, she vanished into the water." Rose felt a chill. The house was full of hidden memories, but some felt too close to ghosts. Catherine turned toward her. "Today you must stay away from Fisher. Thomas told him to watch you. Fisher will do what he is told, but he is uneasy. He fears Thomas as much as anyone." Rose nodded. "I need to learn about the woman who was here before me. You said she lived in my cabin." Catherine hesitated. "I do not know her name. Thomas never said it. She was simply called Girl by the house servants. But Dinah may remember more." Dinah always remembered more. Rose found her in the kitchen rolling dough on the large wooden table. The warm smell of bread mixed with ash from the hearth. Dinah's eyes flicked up when Rose entered. "You should not be here long," she muttered. "Fisher came by this morning looking around." Rose stepped closer. "I need to know about the woman who lived in my cabin before me." Dinah paused. Her shoulders stiffened, and she pressed her palms flat against the dough. "I wondered when you would ask. You have her look. Same shape of face. Same way of watching everything quietly." "What happened to her?" Rose asked. Dinah lowered her voice. "She disappeared. That is all we know. One day she was here. The next she was gone. Mr. Hartwell said he sent her to Alabama. But no traders ever came for her. No wagons. No papers. Nothing." She leaned closer. "The night before she vanished, she came to me. She was scared. She said Mr. Hartwell was angry with her. She said she reminded him too much of someone he lost. She did not say who. Then she asked me a strange thing." "What did she ask?" Dinah swallowed. She asked if the river ever gives anything back. Rose felt cold. Louisa's body had been found miles downstream, tangled in roots. The woman before her had feared the river. And now Rose felt its pull too. The river held memories, maybe answers, maybe warnings. Dinah hurried her away before Fisher returned. Rose stepped outside, trying to clear her mind. She needed to see the cabin where the other woman had lived. Her own cabin. Perhaps something had been left behind. The enslaved quarters stood near the edge of the woods. Rose approached quietly, watching for Fisher. The cabin felt different today. The storm had loosened the earth, and the ground was soft beneath her feet. When she stepped inside, the air smelled of damp wood and old secrets. She knelt where the floorboards creaked the most. She had already hidden her journal beneath a loose plank near her bed, but now she searched the rest of the room carefully. She lifted board after board, listening to each one. Then she found it. A plank near the far wall was slightly warped. She pried it up with her fingers. Something thin and dark lay beneath it. A ribbon, faded blue, torn at the end. She lifted it gently, and it crumbled slightly in her hand. A memory stirred in her mind. Catherine had mentioned Louisa wearing a pale blue ribbon during her visit to the plantation. Dinah had said the other woman had a similar ribbon. And now Rose held a piece of that fear in her hands. Someone had hidden it, or lost it during a struggle. Her breath caught. Suddenly footsteps sounded outside. Rose quickly slipped the ribbon into her dress and replaced the board. She stood just as Fisher appeared in the doorway. His face was stern but uncomfortable, as if he hated the position he had been placed in. "Mr. Hartwell gave orders," he said. "You are not to be alone in the cabins. Or near the woods. Or anywhere near the river without permission." Rose kept her voice steady. "I was fetching something I left behind last night." Fisher nodded slowly. "You are smart girl. Too smart. Do not let him see that. Smart women in this place do not live long." Rose felt a jolt of fear. Fisher looked as if he wanted to say more, but he stepped away and motioned for her to follow him back toward the house. As she walked, the ribbon burned like a warning in her pocket. Back at the house, Rose returned to Catherine's room. Catherine looked up at her immediately. "Something happened," she whispered. Rose closed the door. "Catherine, I found something. Under the floor. A blue ribbon." Catherine's face drained of color. "Louisa wore a blue ribbon the day she died. And the woman before you was said to have one too." Rose's heart pounded. What if they were both taken to the river? What if he used the same place? Thomas said Louisa slipped. But what if she fought? What if the ribbon tore before she went in? Catherine whispered, "You think he killed them both?" Rose felt her voice shake. "I think he kills anyone who tries to leave him." Catherine pressed a trembling hand to her mouth. Suddenly she stood and walked to her wardrobe. She opened a small wooden box inside. "For years I kept this hidden. I thought if I forgot it, the memories would die." Inside the box was a letter. The writing was elegant but faint. Louisa's handwriting. Catherine placed it in Rose's hands. Rose unfolded it carefully. It was dated the night before Louisa's death. "He will take me to the river tomorrow. I will tell him the truth. If I do not return, the river holds the answer." Rose looked at Catherine. "This is proof." Catherine shook her head. "Proof means nothing here. Not in Georgia. Not when he controls the courts and the neighbors and the men who carry out his commands." Rose understood. The law would never protect her. It had not protected Louisa. It had not protected the woman before her. But something was growing inside Rose that Thomas Hartwell could not control. Knowledge, determination, and a plan. She looked toward the window. The storm clouds had parted, but a new storm was forming inside her. The river held answers, and Rose knew the time was coming when she would have to face its truth. If you want, I can now write part 6 in the same style. Engaging hook. Evil hides best in daylight. It smiles. It speaks softly. It pretends to care. And that is why the most dangerous monsters are the ones who look most like ordinary men. Part 6. The morning sun rose over Hartwell Plantation, but its light felt cold. The brightness did not warm the walls. It only revealed the cracks. Rose walked through the house with slow steps, aware that every shadow seemed to watch her. Every corner felt alive with secrets waiting to whisper her name. Thomas Hartwell was in a good mood. That was always the most terrifying time. Evil men often smiled the widest when they believed no one could stop them. Rose found him in the dining room with a plate of eggs and ham before him. He ate neatly, almost gracefully, as if he wanted the world to think his manners proved his goodness. He looked up as soon as she entered. "Good morning, Rose. You slept well, I trust." Rose kept her voice polite. "Yes, sir." Thomas studied her with the same interest one might give a fine horse. Beautiful, quiet, useful. His gaze slid across her face and she felt the same cold sickness she had felt on her first night there. She remembered the ribbon in her pocket and her fingers curled tightly around it. It was the only thing that made her feel connected to the truth. The truth he wanted buried. "You will accompany me on the grounds today," Thomas said. "I have business at the river. I require your presence." The river. The word felt like a blade sliding into her spine. Rose held her breath. "Yes, sir." He smiled again. "Good girl." She turned to leave, but he called after her. "Do not visit Catherine this morning. She is to rest. The doctor will see her later." Rose felt panic rise inside her. Catherine was her one ally. Her one voice of truth. Thomas keeping them apart meant he suspected more than he was willing to say. She lowered her head. "Yes, sir." Outside, the air was warm but the breeze carried the smell of wet earth. The rain from the storm had softened the ground, leaving muddy prints wherever someone walked. Rose passed by the garden and saw Richard sitting on the back steps. He looked troubled. He stood when he saw her. "My father wants you to go with him today." "I know," she said. Richard leaned closer. "You should be careful. When father is cheerful, something is wrong. He gets that way before things happen. I cannot explain it." Rose looked at him and saw something she had not noticed before. Fear. The boy feared his own father. Maybe he had seen things, heard things, understood things children should never understand. "Thank you," she whispered. Richard stepped back quickly, afraid someone might have seen them speaking. He returned to the steps and pretended to read from the small book in his hands. Rose walked toward the front of the house where Thomas was waiting with his horse. A second horse stood ready for her. Rose had never been taught to ride, but Thomas liked showing off control. He helped her onto the saddle, his hand lingering on her waist far longer than needed. She felt herself tremble but forced her face to remain calm. They rode toward the river. The horses moved steadily through the soft dirt, leaving deep tracks. The trees whispered with every step. Sunlight flickered between branches. It should have been peaceful, but the air felt wrong. Too still, too alert. Thomas spoke casually, as if they were enjoying a pleasant morning. "Catherine seems to be improving. I am pleased, though I remain concerned about the ideas she shares with you. Sick women can be dramatic. You must not take her words too seriously." Rose stared ahead. "Yes, sir. You understand that sometimes people imagine things that never happened. They confuse memories. They twist stories, especially women with weak nerves." Rose felt her stomach turn. "Sir, Catherine is your wife. She deserves compassion." Thomas laughed softly. "Compassion is earned. Respect is earned. Loyalty is earned. Catherine has lived a comfortable life. She forgets that everything she has comes from my generosity. Without me she would be nothing." Rose did not trust her voice, so she stayed silent. Thomas clicked his tongue and the horse sped up. Soon they reached the riverbank. The water was high from the storm, brown and fast and churning. Rose felt dizzy. The sound of rushing water filled her ears like a warning from the earth itself. He dismounted and tied his horse to a tree. Rose's hands shook as she climbed down. Mud clung to her shoes. The river roared, wild and dangerous. It swallowed sound. It swallowed truth. Thomas stepped close to her. "You seem nervous, Rose. The river frightens you." She forced herself to meet his eyes. "The river is powerful, sir." He nodded. "Yes, it is. Nature has a way of washing things clean. Of removing what does not belong. Of carrying away old mistakes." Rose felt faint. She understood every hidden meaning. He walked along the bank, studying the land. "The storm has changed the path again. Every few years the river moves. It takes what it wants." He glanced back at her. Louisa never understood that. Rose felt her breath stop. He had never spoken Louisa's name aloud to her. Now he said it as if testing her reaction. She steadied herself. Miss Louisa was loved by many. Thomas's mouth twitched with something like irritation. She was loved too much. She had too much spirit. Too many opinions. A wife should be calm, obedient, grateful. He stepped closer. Louisa wanted to end her engagement. Did you know that Rose? Rose froze. Her heart raced. She spoke carefully. Catherine said something like that. Thomas smiled without warmth. Catherine is foolish. She believes every sad story. The truth is simple. Louisa had a weak heart. She was nervous. She slipped. She fell. Accidents happen. The lies came smoothly from him. He had practiced them for 10 years. She tried again. Sir, I do not wish to speak of past sorrows. He touched her chin. But the past shapes the future. A man cannot move forward if those around him cling to old rumors. Rose pulled away gently and looked at the river. The swirling water blurred her vision. She imagined Louisa standing here. Terrified. Alone. She imagined the other woman. Faceless. Nameless. She imagined their last moments. Thomas reached into his pocket and pulled out something wrapped in cloth. He placed it on a flat stone. Open it, Rose. Her hands trembled. She unwrapped it slowly. Inside was a small silver hair comb. Delicate. Decorated with tiny flowers. Catherine had told her Louisa wore a silver comb on the day she died. Rose felt sick. So this belongs to Miss Louisa. Thomas smiled. Yes. It was returned after her death. I keep it as a reminder of life's fragile nature. One moment we stand on solid ground. The next moment we fall. He stepped behind her. Too close. Too quiet. Rose tried to breathe. The river roared louder. The air thickened. Then Thomas whispered, "You belong to me, Rose. Do not forget that. Women who forget their place often find trouble. I want you to remember how easily life can change in one moment." She closed her eyes. She knew this was a warning. A threat. A promise. Thomas stepped away and picked up the cloth. Enough for today. We return home. I will expect you in the house before dinner. Catherine must rest. Rose followed him, every step feeling heavier than the last. Her heart pounded. Her hands shook. She knew without doubt that Thomas Hartwell was preparing something. Louisa, the nameless woman, maybe even Catherine, and now her. The river had taken his secrets before. But this time, Rose promised herself, she would not let the water stay silent. If you want, I can now write part 7 in the same style. Engaging hook. Some secrets grow in the dark until they no longer hide. And at Whitmore House, the darkness was waking up. Part 7. The storm had passed, but the fear inside Whitmore House remained. Abigail Walker had spent the night sitting upright in the old rocking chair, holding a lantern that flickered as if afraid of the air around it. She had not slept at all. Sleep felt dangerous now, almost like an invitation for the shadows to come closer. When morning finally arrived, she stepped out of the chair with tired legs and walked slowly toward the window. The sky outside was gray and heavy. The kind of sky that promised more trouble soon. Abigail knew she needed answers. What she had seen the night before was not imagination. The figure moving in the hallway. The whispers that seemed to float through the walls. The strange coldness that followed her even when she held the lantern close. Everything inside this house was speaking to her, but not with words. The house was telling her to run, yet also pulling her deeper inside. She did not understand it, but she felt it strongly. She grabbed her shawl and stepped into the hallway. The air smelled like dust and old wood and something else. Something metallic, like old blood. She tried not to think about that. She walked down the long hall until she reached the staircase. Something had changed. She noticed marks on the banister. Long scratches, deep and uneven. They had not been there yesterday. She reached out and touched one with her fingertip. It felt rough, like something had clawed at the wood with force. A sudden noise made her pull her hand back. It came from the parlor. A soft thud, then another. She moved carefully toward the door, holding her breath. When she pushed it open, she found the source of the sound. A book had fallen from the tall shelf. A large old book with a cracked leather cover. She stepped toward it and knelt down. The pages were yellow and smelled like smoke. She picked it up and opened it. The writing inside was strange. Faded ink. Symbols she could not understand. Names she had never seen before. And drawings that made her stomach twist. Drawings of the house. Drawings of people standing in circles. Drawings of a creature with no eyes. Abigail closed the book quickly. Her heart was beating too fast. She placed it on the table and backed away from it. She knew she could not ignore it. But she was not ready to understand it yet. She walked out of the parlor and into the dining room. It looked the same as always. Long table, 3 chairs, a painting of a woman in a blue dress. The woman had a calm face, but her eyes seemed different today. Abigail stepped closer to the painting. The eyes looked darker than before. Almost angry. She took a step back. She needed air. She needed to get out of this room. As she turned to leave, she heard footsteps behind her. Slow, heavy, moving toward her. She froze. The footsteps stopped. She could not bring herself to turn around. Her throat tightened. Her hands trembled. She finally forced herself to look. But there was nothing there. The room was empty, completely silent. She felt cold again. The same cold she had felt the night before. It wrapped around her like invisible hands. She rushed out of the room and leaned against the wall in the hallway. Her breath came in shaky gasps. She needed to leave the house. Only for a moment. To clear her mind, she hurried toward the front door and stepped outside. The air was cool but refreshing. She walked toward the barn at the edge of the property. The grass crunched beneath her shoes. The barn door was half open. She pushed it gently and stepped inside. The smell of hay filled the air. It felt calmer here, quieter. She ran her fingers along the wooden beams as she walked deeper inside. Then she saw something that made her stop. A lantern hanging from a hook. It was still lit. Someone had been here recently. She looked around. No footsteps in the hay. No sound except the wind outside. She approached the lantern. Beneath it, on the ground, was a piece of folded paper. She bent down and picked it up. Her hands shook as she opened it. The writing was messy, rushed, almost frantic. Only 4 words were written. "It is waking up." Abigail stared at the paper until the words blurred. She did not know who had left it. But they knew something. Something she needed to know. Before she could think more, she heard the barn door slam behind her. She jumped and turned around. The door was closed. She ran toward it and pulled hard. It would not open. Someone had locked it. She banged on the wood with her fists. "Let me out." Her voice echoed in the empty barn. She heard something move above her. Something in the loft. Something heavy. The floorboards creaked. She stepped back slowly, keeping her eyes upward. Dust drifted down from the ceiling. Another creak. Then silence. Abigail held her breath. A shadow appeared on the loft floor. Large. Wrongly shaped. It stretched across the wooden boards like a creature crawling on all 4s. Abigail felt the cold again. Stronger than ever. She backed away until her back hit the wall. The shadow moved closer. Slow. Almost curious. She reached for the lantern on the hook. Her fingers barely touched it when the shadow suddenly froze. Silence. Stillness. Then the barn door burst open behind her, knocking her off balance. She fell to the ground. When she looked up, the shadow was gone. Completely gone. She scrambled to her feet and ran out of the barn as fast as she could. She did not stop running until she reached the house. She collapsed on the porch steps, gasping for breath and shaking from fear. She clutched the note in her hand. The words burned in her mind. "It is waking up." She looked at the house. The windows seemed darker. The walls seemed taller. And for the first time, she felt the house watching her. Not just haunting her, watching her. The storm had passed, but a new storm was rising. And whatever lived inside Whitmore House had opened its eyes. If you want part 8, just say, continue with part 8. Engaging hook. Sometimes the truth does not hide in the dark. Sometimes it walks right toward you, and Whitmore House was no longer pretending to be asleep. Part 8. Abigail Walker spent the rest of the morning sitting on the front steps of the old house, staring at the land around her as if the trees themselves might whisper an answer. Her hands trembled slightly while holding the small note she had found in the barn. 4 words that refused to leave her mind. "It is waking up." The message felt like a warning, but also like a confession. Someone else had seen something. Someone else knew the truth. She stood up slowly and looked at the tall windows of Whitmore House. They stared back at her like empty eyes. She took a step closer and felt the weight of the place pressing against her chest. It was not just fear. It was something else, something like the house was expecting her. She walked inside carefully, closing the door behind her. The silence inside felt heavier than before. Each room seemed to hold its breath. Abigail walked to the parlor where she had left the strange book. It still rested on the table. She moved closer and opened it again, turning each page slowly even though her fingers shook. The symbols inside made no sense. Circles, lines, shapes that twisted like vines. She found drawings of people standing around a fire. Their faces were marked with black paint. Their eyes were blank. On the next page, she found the same creature she had seen before. The one with no eyes. Its body stretched in a strange shape. Its mouth open as if silently screaming. She closed the book again. Her heart beat faster. Someone had created this book to hide something or reveal something. She did not know which. She took a deep breath and left the parlor, making her way to the upper floor. The hallway felt colder. She walked slowly, passing the doors one by one. When she reached the final door at the end of the hall, she stopped. She had never opened this one. She did not know why. Something inside her always told her not to touch it. Today she felt something different. A pull, a force that felt both dangerous and necessary. She reached for the doorknob. It turned easily. The door creaked open, revealing a small room covered in dust. A single window let in a weak beam of light. But the thing that caught her attention was the trunk in the middle of the floor. It was old, very old. She walked toward it and knelt down. The lock had rusted away. She lifted the lid slowly. Inside were papers, letters, journals, drawings. The first paper she lifted was dated 1834. Her breath caught. That was long before she was born. She opened the journal on top of the pile. The writing was neat, written in a careful hand. She began to read. Today the ritual failed. The creature did not listen. It grows stronger. It wants to be free. We must keep it asleep. If it wakes, the house will fall and the land will suffer. Abigail froze. Ritual, creature, sleep. These were the same things she had seen in the strange book downstairs. She read further. The Walker family has been chosen to guard the secret. We cannot allow anyone to disturb the silence. We cannot allow the truth to escape. Her breath shook. Walker. Her name. Abigail felt her throat tighten. It felt impossible, but the journal mentioned her family. Her ancestors. She kept reading, turning page after page. The creature is tied to this house. It feeds on fear. It sleeps when the family is at peace. It wakes when violence or sorrow fills the walls. Tonight we failed. Tonight it moved. The writing ended suddenly. The next page was blank. Abigail put the journal aside and reached for another. She opened it and found only one sentence written inside. If it wakes completely, the house will no longer belong to the living. Abigail dropped the journal. A chill ran up her spine. The house had always felt strange to her. But she thought it was old and lonely. She never thought it was alive in its own way. She stood up slowly and backed away from the trunk. She needed to breathe. She needed to understand. She turned toward the door. But something blocked her way. A shadow, tall and thin, standing inside the doorway without moving. Abigail froze. She could not see a face. She could not see any features. Just darkness shaped like a person. The shadow did not step toward her. It simply watched. Abigail felt her heartbeat pounding loudly in her ears. She wanted to run, but her legs would not move. She whispered, "Who are you?" The shadow tilted its head slightly, as if curious. Then it stepped backward into the hallway and vanished around the corner. Abigail rushed to the door and looked into the hall. Nothing. No sound. Only the long, empty corridor staring back at her. She hurried downstairs with the journals in her arms. She spread them across the dining table and read more passages. Every journal told the same story in different words. The house was built on ancient land. The first settlers disturbed something they did not understand. A creature that fed on human emotions was trapped inside the foundation. The Walker family learned the truth and took responsibility for generations. A responsibility that had passed down to her without her knowing. She began to understand the coldness, the whispers, the moving shadows. The house was waking because something had changed. Something that upset the silence it needed. She thought of the night she arrived. She had brought sorrow with her. Grief, pain. Maybe this pain had stirred the creature. Maybe it was responding to her. She needed help. She needed someone who knew the full truth. She remembered the note in her pocket. Someone else had warned her. Someone else was watching. Perhaps the person who left the note was the only one who understood what was happening. She walked to the porch again and looked toward the tree line. The woods stood still, but she felt someone there. Someone who had been watching her since she arrived. She stepped off the porch and walked toward the trees. The wind blew through the branches. Leaves rustled. The quiet felt deep and overwhelming. When she reached the edge of the woods, she stopped. A figure stood between the trees. A person wearing a dark coat. Abigail felt her breath catch. She could not see their face. She took a careful step forward. "Are you the one who left the note?" The figure stepped forward a little, just enough for her to see the outline of a hat and shoulders. But the face remained hidden. "You should not have opened the room," the figure said softly. Abigail felt her knees weaken. "Who are you? What is happening to this house?" The figure stepped back slowly as if afraid to come closer. "You must leave before nightfall. It is stronger now. You cannot stay here." Abigail shook her head. "Tell me what it is." The figure hesitated, then whispered only one reply before disappearing into the trees. "It is the thing your family tried to bury." Abigail stood frozen, staring into the woods. The sun was sinking lower. Night was coming, and the house behind her suddenly felt alive. Breathing, waiting, and now she knew. The creature was not just waking up. It was waking up for her. If you want part 9, just say, continue with part 9. Engaging hook. Night can hide many things, but in Whitmore House, darkness does not cover the truth. It reveals it. Part 9. Abigail Walker stood at the edge of the woods long after the mysterious figure had disappeared among the trees. The quiet felt heavier now. Even the birds stopped singing as if the forest itself feared what waited inside the house behind her. She turned slowly and stared at the tall windows of Whitmore House. The glass reflected the setting sun, glowing like eyes that were watching her return. She clutched the journal she had taken from the upstairs trunk. Its pages shook in her hand though she tried to steady herself. The figure's warning echoed in her mind. Leave before nightfall. Something stronger now. Something waiting. But she knew running was no longer an option. The truth was inside the house, and she felt it pulling her back like a rope tied around her waist. She stepped onto the porch again. The wood groaned under her weight as if protesting her choice. When she opened the front door, a cold wind rushed past her, though no windows were open. The hallway lights flickered. Every sound felt wrong. Too sharp. Too close. Too aware of her presence. She walked to the dining room where she had left the journal spread across the table. The pages fluttered even though the room was still. She leaned over them and searched for anything she had missed earlier. One journal mentioned a night called the Trembling Hour, a time when the creature beneath the house stirred in hunger. Another spoke of the blood he remembers, a phrase she did not understand. As she read, she noticed something odd. A word appeared in several journals. A name, Lydia. Abigail whispered it. Lydia. She had never heard it before. She looked through the papers again until she found a passage that made her breath stop. Lydia Walker broke the seal. Lydia called its name. Lydia disappeared and the house took her. Abigail leaned back. Her heart thumped loudly. Lydia Walker. A woman from her family. Someone who had faced the same creature. Someone who had vanished inside the house. Abigail felt a chill run down her back. She wondered if that was the shadow she had seen before. A lost ancestor wandering the house, trapped between this world and something else. The room suddenly dimmed. The lights flickered and then died. Darkness swallowed the house. Abigail stood still and listened. The silence grew thicker, almost physical. Something moved above her. A slow dragging sound in the upstairs hallway. The creature was awake. She could feel its presence deep in the floorboards, like a heartbeat under the house. She lit a candle from the table and held it up. The small flame wavered, struggling to stay alive. Shadows stretched along the walls, twisting in unnatural shapes. Abigail forced herself toward the stairs. She needed to know what the creature wanted. She needed to understand why it woke for her. The stairs groaned as she climbed. When she reached the top, the hallway was colder than the downstairs rooms. Her breath floated in the air. The doors on both sides of the hallway were slightly open even though she had closed them earlier. The dragging sound returned. Slow, heavy. It came from the far end of the hall. Abigail stepped forward. Her candle dimmed with each step. When she reached the final door, she hesitated. It was the same room where she had found the journals. She pushed the door open. The trunk sat in the center of the room again even though she had left it against the wall. The lid was open. Something inside shifted. She moved closer. A figure rose from the trunk slowly as if pulled by invisible hands. The figure was a woman. Pale, thin. Her hair fell around her face like wet strands. Her dress was old, yellowed with age. Her eyes were dark and empty. Abigail stepped back, gripping the candle tighter. "Who are you?" Abigail whispered. The woman lifted her head. Her voice came out soft and broken. "Lydia." Abigail's heart jumped. The lost walker woman. She took a shaky breath. "What happened to you?" Lydia stepped forward. Her feet made no sound on the floor. Her face looked sad rather than frightening. "I opened the seal," she said. "I called to it. I thought I could control it. I was wrong." Abigail nodded slowly. "What is it? What does it want?" Lydia lifted her hand and touched her own chest. "It feeds on sorrow and fear. It grows stronger when the family breaks. When pain fills the house." Abigail felt her throat tighten. She thought of her own grief when she arrived. The sadness she carried with her. The creature had sensed it. "Why me?" she asked. Lydia stepped closer, her face filled with sorrow. "Because you are the weakest. Your heart is cracked. It wants to slip through the cracks." Abigail backed away until her shoulders hit the wall. Lydia floated closer. "You must leave. Tonight. If you stay, it will take you like it took me." Abigail closed her eyes for a moment. "I cannot leave. Not without stopping it." Lydia's expression twisted in fear. "No one can stop it. Not anymore. It is too awake." Abigail shook her head. "There must be something. A way to put it back to sleep." Lydia hesitated. Her form flickered like a candle flame. "There is a room beneath the house. A place where the first walker sealed it away. Blood was used to bind it. Blood must seal it again." Abigail felt cold wash over her. "My blood." Lydia nodded. "Your blood. The last of the walker line." Abigail's hands trembled. She did not want to believe it. But she knew Lydia was telling the truth. "Where is the room?" Abigail whispered. "In the basement. Behind the brick wall." Suddenly the house shook. The floorboards trembled. A deep rumbling echoed through the hallway. Lydia gasped and faded slightly. "It knows. It hears us. Go. Now." Abigail ran out of the room. The walls vibrated as she hurried down the stairs. The candle went out, leaving her in cold darkness. She grabbed the banister and followed the sound of her footsteps toward the basement door. When she opened it, a wave of cold air hit her. The stairs descended into pitch blackness. She swallowed hard and stepped down. The air smelled old and damp. She reached the bottom and felt the wall with her hands. Lydia had said there was a hidden place. Abigail pressed along the bricks until one moved inward. She pushed harder. The entire section of wall slid aside. A narrow room lay beyond. The floor was covered in symbols. A stone slab lay in the center like an altar. The air vibrated with a strange hum. Abigail stepped inside. The room felt alive. The hum grew louder. Then she heard breathing behind her. Slow, deep, hungry. She turned slowly. A tall shadow filled the doorway. Its limbs were long and twisted. Its head tilted like a broken doll. It stepped toward her, and the room felt smaller. The creature had no face. Only darkness. Abigail stepped back until her hand touched the stone slab. The creature moved closer. She remembered Lydia's words. Blood must seal it again. Her fingers closed around a sharp stone lying on the altar. She lifted it with shaking hands. The creature reached for her. Abigail raised the stone toward her own palm. "I will not let you take me," she whispered. Then she pressed the stone into her skin. Her blood fell onto the symbols. The room shook. The creature screamed without a mouth. and the darkness crashed toward her like a storm. If you want part 10 final part, just say, continue with part 10. Engaging hook. Some doors, once opened, can never be closed. But in Whitmore House, one final act could end a century of terror. Part 10 final part. Abigail's hands shook as she pressed her blood onto the carved symbols. The air vibrated with a low hum, growing louder with every heartbeat. The darkness from the hallway poured into the basement, pressing against the walls like living water. The creature had followed her, drawn by her presence, by the blood of the Walker line. Its long twisted limbs reached forward, but the stone slab's markings flared red with a sudden brilliance. A scream erupted from somewhere deep within the house, raw and hungry. Abigail's pulse raced, but she remembered Lydia's warning. Keep your heart steady. Do not flinch. The creature thrived on fear. It lunged. Its form twisted and elongated as if trying to squeeze through every crack in the stone walls. Abigail clenched the knife she had pressed into her palm, letting the blood drip across the final symbol. The air thickened. The hum became a roar. Dust swirled around her, and the stone slab glowed fiercely, a protective shield forming around her. The creature's scream pierced the basement, a sound that seemed to shake the very foundation of the house. Shadows writhing along the walls pulled back as if dragged by invisible chains. Abigail focused, chanting the words Lydia had shown her in the old journal. Her voice wavered at first, then grew strong. Blood on the stone, the words of the Walker ancestors, and her own courage created a link, a binding spell that reached back across generations. For a moment, time seemed to stop. The world outside the basement no longer existed. The creature's limbs flailed, clawing at the glowing symbols, but it could not break the circle. Its screeches turned into whispers, pleading and furious. Abigail kept her eyes on the markings, her voice steady. She would not falter. Not now. Then, with a final shriek that shook the air like thunder, the creature recoiled. Its dark mass began to collapse inward, folding on itself, compressing until it was nothing more than a shadow pulled into the stone floor. The basement went silent. The hum faded. Even the air seemed to exhale. Abigail fell to her knees, trembling, tears streaming down her face. She had done it. She had ended the terror. She stayed there for a long time, letting her heart slow, letting the basement calm. Finally, she rose, pushing herself toward the hidden wall. She pressed on the bricks, and the door swung closed. The secret of the Walker bloodline, the curse that had haunted Whitmore House for generations, was sealed once more. Only this time, Abigail had survived. When she ascended the stairs, the house felt different. The heavy darkness that had weighed on every room was gone. The hallways smelled less of dust and decay. The candle she carried flickered gently, not struggling as it had before. Sunlight streamed faintly through the windows, and Abigail felt a strange warmth on her face. The house seemed quiet, almost respectful. She checked Catherine's room first. The older woman was awake, sitting by the window with a shawl wrapped around her shoulders. She looked at Abigail and smiled weakly. "It is done," Abigail whispered. Catherine's eyes widened slightly. "Did you?" She nodded, letting herself collapse into the chair. The years of fear and despair seemed to lift from her shoulders. Tears ran down her face. "I feel free," she said, barely believing her own words. Abigail moved to gather her journal and the scattered pages. Every secret she had uncovered, every warning, every note about the Walker curse, was documented. She knew the truth would be important, not just for her own family, but for anyone who might one day face the darkness again. Knowledge, she realized, was as powerful as courage. The rest of the house seemed to breathe with her as she moved through it. The furniture, the old curtains, even the floorboards felt lighter. Abigail paused in the dining room, remembering all the nights she had spent here, listening to the creaks, the whispers, the footsteps that were never human. Now the house felt alive, yes, but alive in a normal way. Not haunted, not hungry. She descended to the front door and stepped outside. The air was cool and fresh, carrying the scent of pine and spring rain. Birds chirped in the distance. Whitmore House looked like any other grand home, beautiful and imposing in the sunlight. Nothing suggested the horrors hidden within its walls, nothing betrayed the century of terror that had been sealed away forever. Abigail looked back one last time. She had been changed. She knew the darkness could return if someone ever unlocked the wrong door, disturbed the wrong artifact. But for now, Whitmore House was quiet. Peaceful. The story of the Walker curse, of Lydia, and of the creature beneath the house, would remain a warning to those who came after. She tucked the journals carefully under her arm and walked down the path, leaving the house behind. Every step felt lighter than the last. Freedom, she realized, was not just escaping fear. It was confronting it, facing it, and ending it. Later that evening, as Abigail wrote the final entries in her own journal, she reflected on the chain of events that had led her here. She thought of Lydia, of her own ancestors, of the courage it had taken to confront a terror no one else could see. And she knew one truth with absolute certainty: secrets might hide in shadows, but courage shines brighter than any darkness. Abigail closed the journal and placed it on the table beside her bed. For the first time in her life, she slept without fear. Outside, the wind whispered through the trees, carrying a soft, almost approving sigh from Whitmore House. The house, once a prison of horror, now held only silence and memory. Her work was done. History had been preserved, terror had been ended, and a line of her family had survived to tell the tale. Abigail Walker had faced the darkness of Whitmore House, and she had won. If you want to uncover more forgotten stories of horror and history, make sure to subscribe to the channel, hit the notification bell so you never miss an episode, and leave a comment telling us where you are watching from. Share this story with friends who love suspense and history. Your engagement helps bring more secrets to light.